Okay, one more thought for me. I'll try to keep this one quick so we can stay more or less within the hour. But this is another thing I've been thinking about recently. And I call this the attack on industrial collaboration. The attack on industrial collaboration. And I'll give you just examples of how I think that what I mean by industrial collaboration, and then how this is under attack in a lot of different places. So I'll give you just two kind of quick schematic historical examples, which are a little bit oversimplified. But if you just take the issue of heating historically, so you think about people generating heat, which is a fundamental human need just about everywhere in the world. They use fire, and then at a certain point they use coal stoves. And then what happens is at a certain point, people figure out, okay, there's a more decentralized way we can generate heat. So we can collaborate industrially. So we're not just each burning coal in our homes, which is both pretty expensive and has a lot of side effects on our air, but we can collaborate and have a more central solution. So we can get economies of scale, and then we can get a situation where we're going to be able to produce more power per person at less cost, and we're going to be able to produce less pollution, in part because, let's say, we can use smokestacks, and at least we can disperse things in a way that's not going to be as dangerous. So this is a common kind of phenomenon where people figure out a way to collaborate, and then they produce something that's more cost effective with fewer side effects. There's also the second example is with automobiles, which is a kind of similar thing where for the need of transportation, people are using horses, and then that's causing all sorts of real air pollution issues because it's biological air pollution and people are getting sick and it's polluting the water. And then people figure out, oh, well, there's this way to manufacture automobiles, and that is ultimately a much more cost-effective way to get around. It gives you a lot more power, and then it also generates way less in terms of dangerous air emissions. So you have more mobility and fewer side effects with that. And then with the first example, you have more power and fewer side effects. And yet note that in both situations, both the coal industry and the auto industry or the gasoline industry in some cases, are criticized for making our air dirtier. And they're often, sometimes people invoke the concept of rights, and they'll say, well, these industries made our air dirtier. And my response to that, and we have a right to pristine air. And I say, no, that's not true, because what actually happened is we engaged in industrial collaboration to meet a fundamental need, whether it was heat or mobility, and we figured out a way to collaborate to make it not only better, but also cleaner. So how can we say that the lower level of emissions than what we would naturally have on our own is somehow a violation of our rights? I don't think it's a violation of our rights. And I think this idea that, we have a right to pristine air is based on the idea that nature is perfect, including pristine. But no, human life is not pristine by its nature because it has these very dirty and dangerous elements. And then it takes technology and ingenuity to improve it. So when we're thinking about things like, I have a right to good air quality, we need to look at it in the context of what came before and what would life be like on our own. And in that context, I think we shouldn't have the assumption shouldn't be, the ideal is to have zero air emissions of any kind, because that was never the case. And what you can say is that if you can develop a technology that's just as cost effective and then has less in the way of air emissions, then you should be able, then that's good. And then you can say at a certain point, it's now a violation of our rights because it's no longer necessary for fuel or for heat or for mobility to emit X amount into the air. But if we find a shared solution, a collaborative solution, where in some way we're creating this infrastructure that's generating some emissions, but that's less than before, it's corrupt to say, these emissions are violating our rights. And that's what I take the modern green movement as doing all the time. They're benefiting from the heat. They're benefiting from the mobility, from these industrial collaborations. They're engaging in them. They're asking for the heat. They're asking for the mobility. They want to live in these civilizations. They could go paddle their way to some third world country, but they don't. So they're sharing in the industrial collaboration, and yet they're demanding to be free of the side effects of the collaboration, even though those side effects are way better than what they would be experiencing on their own. So when people invoke rights in that context, I think that's very corrupt. And I see even many libertarian types falling prey to this, where they act like, oh, the baseline of rights is I have right to totally clean air and totally clean water, and nobody can infringe that. That's no, nature does not give that to you. The closest we can get to that is the more we evolve technologically as a society, the more we can earn clean air and clean water. But if you want the air and water to be cleaner, then figure out or support a better technology for doing it. But don't oppose the best technologies that have already made our air and water cleaner and say, oh, I'm for clean air and clean water, therefore I want to stop them. Because if you do that successfully, then you're going to make everyone's life worse, including their environment worse. You're going to make the place that you live and benefit from a much worse place to live.